This is the Unshadowed Thought Podcast with James Hall. This podcast is dedicated to Michelle Goyevich, Ed White, Caitlin Treacle, and I Chan, and also all the others that have lost their life as a direct result of psychiatric harms. Alright, welcome back. Day 11. So, slept really, really well last night. Super lucky. I do not have any insomnia, which is kind of reported. I don't know if it's fair to call it insomnia because you just sleep for 3 or 4 hours. You just require less sleep when you're fasting, or lots of people report that, anyways. It is interesting, though, that even though I feel tired all day, generally, not particularly bad, but like at night when I'm ready to go to sleep, I am not necessarily tired. Like it takes a while for me to fall asleep. Like it takes like 30 minutes. Like I kind of lay there, I just relax, and then I fall asleep. I could see why in other people that would like keep them awake. They're like concerned I'm not going to sleep. You know, it generates a little bit of stress, and they might stay up a little bit longer. But for me, I'm kind of at peace when I'm laying there, happy I made it through another day. I also do really good in the evenings, do bad in the mornings. Today, perfect example of that. Actually, it felt really good laying in bed. Got up, went to use the restroom. I think I stopped breathing because I was preoccupied with what I was doing, but then I started blacking out, and it felt a lot stronger than normally when I kind of get lightheaded when I got up. So I just went and laid right down, and as I laid down, like everything went black, and a really strong, sensation came over me that I had all but passed out, like when I laid down, and then kind of my senses came back to me, and there was kind of this blast of sensation because I was going down for sure. If I didn't go from the bathroom to the bed right at that moment, I'd have been out for sure. No doubt in my mind. It felt much stronger than but the odd thing is that usually when I get up, you keep probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you start to like get lightheaded and get these symptoms. Well, for me, I got up, walked around a little bit, weighed myself, and then went to the bathroom. So I had been up and going, so everything was fine. And then I almost blacked out. So I think I wasn't consciously. I think I stopped breathing. I got distracted with what I was doing. Kind of held my breath when I was going to the bathroom, um, and that's what did it. So yeah, and then I felt like crap. Like I feel a little bit better right now, but for 1 to 2 hours in the morning, I just feel real crappy. But in the evenings, I feel good. So I'm grateful for that. I feel really good in the evenings before bed and stuff, and I rest well. So it's all good. Yeah. Some people get the insomnia. I don't have that. I slept like a full like 9 hours last night. Great sleep. My throat wasn't bothering me anymore. So just racked out hard. Solid. Slept like a log. Was great. Fantastic. Loved it. Um, I'm curious if I don't have the insomnia because I have neurological and brain damage, and maybe my brain's working on fixing itself right now and needs more downtime. And my hypothesis, but it's virtually impossible to know. But that would be cool. So my throat. So yeah, just like I kind of predicted, there seems to be this cycle. So I think the throat is the third or fourth day, and it's virtually gone today. It doesn't hurt. Um, when I swallow, doesn't hurt generally, doesn't hurt at different times. It's just a small sensation. It's resolving. So it's really interesting that it seems like my body is working through, and I've heard this, but it's usually in vague terms, but your body seems to bring things to the surface that agitate real severely and then resolve them, and then bring another thing to the surface. It get super agitated and then resolve it. You can definitely get why people are talking about, feeling that the body's healing itself, healing the different things, some things we didn't even know we had, you know, and I on some level it makes a lot of sense. I don't know how true it is or not, but certainly when we're eating, we don't go through that process, right? You get sick, and you got a bug or something, you get sick. This is almost like getting sick, but it's not from bugs, it's not from anything. Your body is making itself sick and then resolving it over and over. I'm super interested if something else will crop up. I'm like, what will my next affliction be? What will I have to deal with? But the idea of not having anything right now, because I kind of initially pretty quickly set on my back pain, and then this throat thing was always kind of like nagging at me. I'm dealing with, hunger and other things as well. I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the physical stuff. I mean, to some degree, not too bad, because I expected it and understand it all. But I'm like, I have this sense of tranquility and kind of well-being last night and today so far. I think part of that comes from, it's like, oh, I'm not gonna have anything bothering me. I can just chill. You know. My hunger has been even less this morning as well. It was virtually nothing the last few days, for sure, at least, and then before that had been a little bit more, like, it had been kind of diminishing rather than just like instantly disappearing. But today I like so funny thing. Over the last 2 days I've been writing down recipes because my brain has been so focused on food. I'm like, I gotta write this stuff down. I'm thinking like these amazing things I want to eat when I get better, that have like all good ingredients in them. I'm like, I gotta write this down, I can't forget. So I started writing them down, and it was kind of helping me process my attachment to food. Um, and then today, like, my hunger is zero, zilch, nothing. Like, smelling my family's food or thinking about it doesn't do anything for me. There is no provocation of my hunger, zero. And so I'm not like motivated to write down recipes or think about food right now, which is kind of an interesting evolution. It's day 11, so I know there was supposed to be a shift around day 10 to like feeling better. Maybe this is a part of it. I honestly didn't believe it would happen, as I mentioned on the other casts, but here I am. The thing is, for me, is that I've had some good days, and then the next day might be bad, or something big up and down. So we'll see if it stays consistent or not. But for now, that's where I'm sitting at. I've had these thoughts. So for the pontifications for today, I had these thoughts around fasting last night. Um, I was thinking, if I had to explain it to people what fasting does to you, I was trying to think of how to tell people what really happens, how to explain it well to someone so they really effectively understand what's going on. And the truth is, from my perspective, is that fasting heals two things, like your mind and your body. We really don't possess much else from that, right? I mean, and then I'm sure I haven't experienced the spiritual component yet, even though I'm really looking forward to it. And I will mention that as soon as it happens. But so far, I felt kind of like cut off spiritually. And, lots of times we go through hardship, that's how it feels. And that is certainly how I feel. But right now I'm experiencing, like, I feel my body's healing to some degree. I'm confident that it is. There's no doubt in my mind that at a minimum, when I bounce back from this, I will be less sensitive to food and I'll respond better to food when I'm done. I'm absolutely sure. I know my body's purifying itself to some extent. So that undoubted in my perspective, in my mind. But we'll take an accounting when everything's done to make sure that I'm being honest and accurate. But then the second one is the mental aspect. And healing your mind, I think, is very, very hard to do when you're not fasting. or I mean, people work on it. They go to therapy. They talk through this stuff. They work through this stuff. They make life changes. They do all this stuff, and that stuff can be very effective. It can be. I think there's not a high probability that you'll be very effective with it. I think it can take a lot of time. I think it's very arduous. I don't think it's very effective. And this is from my own experience and from what I've seen in others. Generally, people don't change, even with therapy and stuff like that. I think largely that's because people don't want to put in effort, right? Like they just don't do what's required to make the changes because it's very hard. It takes energy. And yeah, fasting takes energy and time. So in the way, you're kind of applying probably the same amount of energy to what you would if you made like massive life changes, right? And then say you went on, you're like, I'm taking a month off work and I'm going to, you know, the Maldives and just chilling out and reassessing everything and whatever, a dream kind of thing, right? But so with fasting, like withholding from yourself and not having anything else to do, really forces you to assess the way you think about things and how you feel about things. Like, for instance, the last few days, my brain has been really focused on food. I'm not necessarily hungry, but I can't stop thinking about food. And for me, I have a huge attachment to food. Like, since I was a child, I always use food as a coping mechanism for how much I thought my life sucked, or it's escapism, right? Like, I escape through food. Food, to me, I'm fasting, so heads up, this might be a little exaggerated, but at this moment, I'm being completely honest, food is the most incredible thing that man has access to and can provide far more gratification than anything else, in my opinion, including like opioids, smoking, drinking, all that stuff. If we abuse food, like, it loses its value, right? Like, you keep drinking, then having one beer does nothing for you, right? Like, you gotta drink a 6-pack. And then if you keep drinking, right, you're either dead or you kind of come to an impasse with it. So, but with food, like, it is absolutely incredible, but we're in just such abundance that we don't get it. And even people that are addicts, or regular people, right? Like, they overindulge in sugar constantly, right? It's so addictive because it's so good. So, I've certainly fell victim to that. I would binge so hard. Like, I got overweight at one point, only one point in my life, and actually it wasn't willful. I was being fed by my family just tons of like calorie-rich food for years. There was this point where we would always eat out. We'd always have these big family meals, and I would always stuff myself, and I became overweight. But before that, even I would get home after work and maybe have a beer and like eat a tub of ice cream, and then have like pastaroni, right? Have like processed cheesy pasta, ice cream, beer, and bed, like every single night, right? Because that was my thing. Like, I was working. Work's not the funnest thing in the world. I look forward to getting home every night, hitting that stuff, and then just going to bed. So, it's just like the escapism and the addiction was just so massive, right? And I never took the time to think about. Actually, I did take the time. I knew what I was doing. I took the time to know, because I remember actually even changing my diet and fasting at that time, because I knew that I need to clean myself out, but I didn't figure out, or take the time to think about whether, when you're young, you feel invincible. I felt like it was perfectly fine to do that. I've been fed this false information from the government and other media sources that calories are calories. You know, if you're really active, my job was really active, right? So if you just burn through these calories and you're not putting on weight, you're healthy, you're fine, you know, and that's definitely not the truth, especially from my perspective. You know, what we put in our body is communicating to our body, our mind, and our spirit, you know, what we're doing here, and understanding your food and interacting with your food mentally and physically have an impact. And that's the way it's been historically, right? In ancient times, this is the way it was. And it's not because they were idiots, it's because they had a higher level of understanding, that is spiritual level of understanding of these things, which is far exceeds our spiritual ability, far exceeds our scientific ability, is what I'm learning now. I mean, looking into the research and seeing where we're at medically, like I'm super dialed in on that. I'm reading research every single day, like for hours usually, trying to learn and understand things. And what I constantly finding out is that there's these wisdoms from the past that are correct and science is constantly denying until they end up finding out is correct, and then they adjust course, right? But until that happens, like, right, primitive man was stupid, ancient man was stupid, and all this negative stuff science generates, or the ones propagating science in its true form is wonderful, right? Like it says, this is what we've learned, and that's all it says. It doesn't say this other stuff is wrong. It says this is what we know right now, you know, and this is what we learned, and this is how we got there, and the evidence is shown, right? Makes perfect sense. That doesn't mean anything else is not true. All it means is under these circumstances, this is true. It's extremely limited. If you think about it, when you read a scientific study or you read the research for medicine, right? That evidence is so limited, it has virtually no value. It's so limited when you think about it. You think about the number of people in a study and what those people's demographics are and whatnot, right? Like, it does not translate to you taking that medication, even if you have the condition it's indicated for, right? That everyone's biology is extremely unique, right? So, just because a medication's approved for something or a device, it doesn't mean you should use it. In fact, the opposite might be true. For you as an individual, it may be indicated as something extremely dangerous, but that's not communicated to you, right? And this is because science is so narrow. But everyone is so incredibly stricken and smitten with science and medicine and all these things. They stop thinking for themselves. They start making these large assumptions like, oh, it correlates, right? It's similar, so it must be true, right? Nothing could be further from the truth. And say, oh, you know, I'm on my deathbed. I'm gonna make a decision here, a life or death decision. Let's make it based on this evidence that we know is not true. I don't know if that's a good decision. You know, there's lots of good ways to make critical decisions. There's a lot of critical things we can do to make decisions that will be effective. And we just, as a whole, as a larger group, we are not doing that. So the fast is bringing all these things into perspective for me, and thinking a lot more deeply about my attachment to food, because the fast brings it up so you can feel it. It's like I can feel my attachments and my addictions and my repetitive thinking. All these things are brought to bear for me so that I can see them and deal with them, right? And a part of it, okay, I had this analogy when I was going to sleep last night in my head. So my thinking was similar to, this is wild. Just bear with me. I feel like by the end of it you'll be glad you did. So say you have a sponge ball, right? And say you dip it in poison, right? And it saturates all that poison, right? And you pick it up and you're bouncing it around in your hands, right? and then you throw it, you bounce it off the walls, you play with it. So as you're doing this stuff, the poison is saturating your hands and the walls and your body, right? Everywhere it moves, like it's leaving this trace, and you can see where it was, and you're very aware of it, right? And if you know it's poison, like you know you have to clean all this stuff up, and but it's everywhere, right? And there's this trace of it, and it saturates everything, and it spreads all over everything, right? That was my thinking before I was fasting. Every thought I had kind of echoed and permeated everything, and left traces, and I was worried about forgetting that thought because it was very, very important, and if I didn't remember, I would get into some sort of trouble, right? But then I had these other concerns that I was worrying about, right? But everything I did left this trail and this kind of damage behind it that I had to go around and clean up and figure out, and I had to remember and make sure that I did everything I did. And then once I did everything I did, I know I could, after I cleaned all the poison off, every last bit of it, I'd be like, okay, I'm good now. I can move on to the next thing, right? Fasting is like holding a clean rubber ball in your hands. And that's your thoughts, right? The rubber ball is your thoughts. And now you're holding it. Everything around you is calm, serene. Your thoughts are focused. It's just clean rubber ball. You have your thought, right? You can toss it around. You can think about it. You can play with it. You can bounce it off the walls and do whatever. And then once you put that rubber ball away, it's gone. There's no trace. There's nothing left. I'm not worried about anything after that thought is gone. And that was kind of my epiphany last night, because I was trying to think of how to relate. I've told you guys previously that I didn't ruminate anymore once I started fasting, right? So, I mean, it's kind of maybe it's an oversimplification, but it does kind of illustrate it in kind of helpful way. But I think that is a little bit more helpful to try to get people to understand what it feels like when you're fasting and you're thinking. And I realized yesterday too, like man, I do something and then I walk away from it. I'm just not worried about it anymore. Where in the past, like anything that I did, if I didn't finish it or I knew something else or I should go back and check on it or something like that, I'd always be worried about it. But that worry would saturate me to a certain extent. Like it would stick with me. And lots of times I would sit there and be like, all right, I don't know what I got to do right now, but there's something I got to do. And I would sit there, right, and like tap my foot, be like, what is it? What am I forgetting right now? What am I forgetting? Okay, there's something. What is it? And I go, oh yeah, that's what it is. And then I go do it, right? Well, I do this rubbish all day, right? So the majority of my time is spent in a state of stress because I'm trying to remember all the things I need to do or the things I set up for myself, right? Even started writing myself notes, and I love making lists. That's very helpful. But there's always something else that kind of is dragging out on me that I need to that I know about that I didn't write down or whatever. So yeah. So your mind goes through. Well, one, as soon as you start fasting, 24 hours in, your mind is going. I experienced this state mentally within 24 hours of the fast. Probably within 12 hours of the fast. Your brain goes into a very different state. And generally, I think people think, oh, I'm nutrient deficient, right? And I don't think that's true. I mean, we still have food in our stomach that's processing by the time we go into this state. I think it's something different than that. Do I know exactly what it is? No. But there's definitely a good shift. And people usually look at it as negative because it feels alien, or it feels like brain fog, or it feels like your brain's slower. Well, if we've been living in an anxious, stressed, or ruminating kind of state for 10 years, 5 years, 4 years, 2 years, 1 year, what do we think it's going to feel like within 12 hours to get shoved into a balanced state or a natural state where our brain and our thoughts can't do these negative things anymore? We're going to feel like you're dying, right? Like it's going to feel like there's something wrong at least. And yeah. So those are the kind of changes that happen. But as time goes on, you're reconciling these thoughts, and your brain is continuing to rectify like its patterns and mesh it to the norm. And you've been fasting for 11 days, and the norm is now this slowed down, balanced mental state, right? So the ideas that you had in the past and stuff keep coming to the forefront. I mean, you could say it's trauma, right? For me, it's this attachment to food that comes from trauma from my past. And I don't know that I have to deal with the trauma. I've been trying to deal with trauma for a long time, right? My childhood. But the attachment and the things that are affecting you negatively or throwing things off balance definitely get dealt with, and you can shape them or change them and deal with them as you like, on the fast. And I think we'll see if these changes, I mean, yeah, wow. The real test will be, I keep thinking, when I'm done with my fast, are these things just going to pop back up, crop back up? After day 11, I'm like, there's no way that I will go back to being the same after the fast. At a minimum, like my thinking patterns and things, they will be altered. They will be different for the better. Whether I get a little bit of change or a lot of change, maybe that depends on how long you fast for. I don't know. But there will definitely be change. I'm absolutely sure of that. So I see my body changing. I see my mind changing at the same time. And all for the better. I am hypersensitive. Like, if I think something's changing for the worst, I freaking lose it, right? I don't have any indication that things are changing for the worst for me, mentally or physically. So, yeah. So I'm good with that. And we will definitely see what happens. So there's kind of my pontification and my addition for the day. Thank you very much for listening. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.